Our next gubernatorial candidate that will be speaking with us today is Charles Lollar. Mr. Lollar served in the United States Marine Corps. Thank you for your service to our nation. We appreciate it. He was on active duty over in Kosovo. Presently, Charles serves as a major in the Marine Corps Reserves and as an intelligence officer. In the private sector, Mr. Lollar was the general manager for Cintas Corporation, where he oversaw 170 employees and he had a $23 million sales budget. Before he joined Cintas, he worked with UPS and he was responsible for 30 employees. He's the former chairman of the New Day Maryland PAC. He serves on the board of directors of the Maryland Taxpayers Association, the Harbor League, Conservative Victory PAC, and Second Genesis. He served on the executive board of directors for the Maryland Chamber of Commerce as well. Charles served as the chairman of the Maryland Taxpayers Commission, fighting to protect the interests of Maryland taxpayers, and was the Maryland State Director of Americans for Prosperity. Thank you for coming, Charles Lollar.
Thank you, RMI. Thank you, Dr. Hicks. And thank you, business community, manufacturing business community, for staying around so long. I really appreciate it. We have certainly been, I think, well addressed by the 4 previous candidates for governor, and we've outlined the problem well. There's some specific solutions I'd like to share with you in conversating this morning. Let me be the first to thank the Attorney General for his endorsement of my candidacy for governor, stating that 2014 will be Governor Lollar's year, so I appreciate that, sir. And where I do agree with that assessment, in addition, I do agree that the state of Maryland is one of the best states. We are sitting in one of the greatest resource states in the country. With our proximity to Washington, D.C., our wonderful natural resources, specifically where energy is concerned, as well as the business climate, as kind of outlined earlier by our work base here, the education of our work base, we have a tremendous opportunity here in the state of Maryland. The question I pose to many that are running for governor and those that certainly are in the seat, the administration there, is why are we not there yet? I was taught early on that insanity is defined by doing the same thing but expecting different results. You all know the numbers and you certainly know the stats. 33% of our manufacturing jobs have lost. That's already been spoken of since 2007. 40,000 jobs and 6,500 small businesses have left. 7.2% unemployment in the state of Maryland. In Baltimore City, over 11%. And roughly 10,000 businesses in the city of Baltimore are closed down, shut for business, many of which were manufacturing jobs. In addition, we have the highest cost per kilowatt hour in terms of energy usage. And being an executive in business and part of a manufacturing company myself, I can tell you that energy as well as labor were my 2 highest expense items and lines. 46th worst in the state to do business, 49th highest unemployment, tax, as well as 45th highest in personal income tax. You just throw a dart and you can hit just about every single problem we have in Maryland with no doubt. But how do we solve these solutions? And I want to make it easier for our recorder by outlining these solutions one at a time. First and foremost, what a Lollar administration would do is we would examine all 74 new taxes and regulations since the current administration began, every single one. We'd examine them with a fine-tooth comb alongside of an industry-focused advisory board, and on that board, in addition, of course, we'd have environmentalists and special interests to make sure they work together. I believe in the 5-foot rule. If you want to find out how to solve a problem, ask the person closest to it. Many of you in business understand that perspective. We need to have more industry-impacted citizens in this advisory board in conjunction with DBED to solve our problems, specifically when it comes to excessive regulation and these 74 new taxes, and determine specifically which ones should be rolled back or altogether eradicated. In addition, number 2, I would explore an above all approach when it comes to my energy policy. And that would include coal, it would include electricity, it would include natural gas, it would include wind, it would include solar power. Without the state government picking winners and losers, my energy policy would be directed toward the consumer. that would allow the consumer to pick and determine what would be best for their business, manufacturing and otherwise, as well as for their resident homes. I think that's very important because we currently have an energy policy, unfortunately, in boards that have outstepped, in my opinion, their positioning. If you just take a look at several boards, specifically, and this is a third part of the plank, we have to investigate, strong word I know, but I'm a business guy, Marine, forgive me, but we have to investigate these non-elected, non-legislative boards that continue to pass hard financial policies on business. Tolls have increased almost 65% in the state, and they're still going up. We have a gas policy that's actually progressive. It's going to go up every year for the next 3 years, according to cost of living, and a public service commission that continues to increase or allow the increase with a certain energy company through the use of trackers to make it even more burdensome in terms of energy cost. It's not that we don't know, no sense hide the monkey, as we term it in business. We know what the problem is, and when it comes to energy and energy expense, why in the world would we allow for a proactive tax in energy on anyone's bill with the promise that it's going to get better when the current status of that energy company in terms of reliability is dead last in the nation. In addition, we need to look into I am proposing in my plan, and I will do this, reduce all three taxes, personal, corporate tax, as well as state income tax by 5% across the board. That's a 41% reduction altogether in taxes, and we can pay for it. And we can get it done because of the stream of businesses that will come plowing back into our great state as a result. I currently have a business advisory board of men and women of Fortune 500 companies and outside of our state, as well as major companies inside our state, as well as 2 governors that advise me and give me counsel. In fact, I went down and spoke with Jim Gilmore down in Virginia and had some time with him because, quite honestly, I've gotten sick of Virginia still in my jobs from my state. I actually had another meeting over at Morton's in Bethesda with Governor Rick Perry, and as I said to the media as they asked me, so you're in favor of the governor of Texas coming to take businesses from Maryland? I looked right back at the media and said that's not exactly what the governor's doing. What he's actually doing is coming and giving businesses that have already made a decision to leave this state an opportunity to choose his state. What we want to do is keep you here. And we want to keep you here by aggressively going after the tax burden that's oppressing. And that's why I specifically asked Dr. Hicks, and Dr. Hicks, I thank you for your service as well, sir. I specifically asked him about the proportion of these indicators and how it impacts manufacturing jobs, because when I pick up the phone and I call, whether I'm fundraising or talking to the business leaders in this state, the first thing they tell me is I'm already on my way out of this state because it's costing me too much to do business in this state. We benefit because we have strong human capital. Where that is true, that human capital has no problem simply packing their goods and traveling right across the Woodrow Wilson Bridge to live and then come back to Maryland to work. You all know these stories. I just don't like kind of walking around them. Why not talk to them and find a way to solve them? Let's talk education. I will develop strategic partnerships through the use of internships with manufacturing jobs as well as secondary schools. Now, follow me for a second. This is important. Not every child that graduates from high school is going to want to go to college or the military. Some actually do want to transition into a strong manufacturing job and enter into the middle class and raise their family and live happily ever after. Those opportunities are dwindling, specifically here in Maryland. I want to copy some of the same things they do in other states, specifically in the Midwest, and say, hey, why not have some of our manufacturing jobs? Why not have these hard discussions and create business clubs and manufacturing clubs and internships with high school seniors, so while they're making their transition from their junior year to senior year, they can spend the entire summer working in these manufacturing jobs. I want to applaud, for example, the private union and what they do with apprenticeships. They do a very good job there, taking high school graduate seniors from secondary education and transitioning them into middle-class jobs through their apprenticeship programs. We can do that across the board here in the state of Maryland, so that we can increase our opportunity from our secondary students transitioning. Thank you so much for the 2 minutes. Transitioning, instead of just one way, one segment to go to college or one segment to go to military. Hey, you can work in a manufacturing job. You can be trained. You can go through an internship. You can understand and stretch your entrepreneurial wings right out of high school. And then finally, enterprise zone creation is wonderful. I believe in it. I think it works, specifically in some of the urban areas of our state. But they're in vain when you have to compete with high crime, drug trafficking on the increase and rise, as well as failing school systems. My administration will look specifically at that and provide, for example, when it comes to school systems, the opportunity of choice for parents. If they choose to homeschool their children, if they choose to take their children to a private level of education, why shouldn't their tax dollars be able to follow their decision? Where I agree with Heather as she talked about starting at the early childhood education level, I believe in starting right there at not just early childhood education, that's good, but right there in the secondary education level. And let's provide our parents with the opportunity of choice. We must change our attitudes toward business and manufacturing in the state of Maryland. If that's your stance, then I'm your candidate. An over-reliance on any industry is not good for our state, and that includes the public sector. If we continue to see an increase in public sector jobs and a decrease in private sector jobs, our economic condition will continue to struggle and fail. We have to increase, we have to partnership better, and we're going to have to turn this corner and increase our private sector and its growth so that we can overall have a better standard of living. And we can do that without proposing or pointing our finger down to the public sector worker. I'm a Marine Corps officer. Tax dollars pay in some part my salary, so I'm not standing against the public sector, but what I am saying in closing is that we have to have partnership and rise the private sector, and my administration will absolutely do that. Thank you all so very much.
Thank you, Mr. Lollar. I have two questions. The first question is, how would you exploit or pursue the natural gas reserves that we have out in the western part of our state? And the second question is, specifically, what would you do with education to help improve our skills gap?
Let me come back to the second question last. I want to do the natural gas question first, then ask you to repeat the second question because my spills were winning. You got me. We're turning. I got me excited. The last person before me talked about natural gas and talked about studying to make sure we do it properly, because it's so important. We got to make sure we're not allowing for methane deposit to enter into water filters, et cetera. I understand that argument, but we've been studying this thing to death. Right, absolutely. Right across. Thank you so much. Right across the border, not even 5-10 minutes up into Pennsylvania, they've been doing this for years and doing it successfully. Participating in distribution of natural gas. And the tragedy is the state of Maryland, 30% of our energy we continue to import from our neighboring states. Here's what I will do. It's time to open the door on this thing. Look at the studies, see where they are presented, and stop trying to run for president. Stop trying to be the most green presidential candidate in the world and say, you know what, this thing is over. Here's what we're doing, and let's go ahead and allow for private companies to drill for natural gas. Let's do it safely. Let's make sure we regulate it appropriately, but the studying is done. We've done enough studying. Let's take what we receive from it, let's press forward, and let's open up this economy so we can make some things happen. The duty experts have spoke. It's time for us to move forward. I understand the importance of being environmentally safe. But I tell you what, if Six Flags had to wait before opening one of their rides for the current administration to do all the safety regulation tests, they'd still be closed down. We have to move forward in business. There's so many things we can do, and as a governor of this state, I'm going to make sure we move forward in that as well as every other energy opportunity in our state. I want to explore them all, but not with government control and not with government influence. Let the private sector determine winners and losers. That's the way it's supposed to be. Second question.
Thank you. Second question. We have a problem with education in our state. How would you address that and help us improve our skills gap?
Well, that's huge. In my opinion, education is one of those industries that is going to have to transition before it's all said and done. And when I say transition, I honestly believe that before we can blink, and some folks may not completely understand this, so pull me to the side, we'll talk about it more, but choice is going to be very important when it comes to education in the future. We're becoming more and more of a diverse state and a diverse country. We have to afford parents the opportunity to choose where they want to send their child for school and education. Education is one of those things the Founding Fathers constitutionally to include in your state constitution allows for state and local governments to decide, not the federal government. So if you want your child to be more technologically savvy and somebody opens up a school that does nothing but focuses on STEM, you should have the freedom to send your child to that school, and your tax dollars should follow. My wife and I, we homeschooled our daughters in the county where we live. And they wouldn't even allow our daughters to participate in the after-school programs in the jurisdiction where they lived. Yet at the same time, I continued to pay $12,500 a year in taxes and supported a system where my 4 daughters did not attend. Something is wrong with that system. We're going to have to open, and by opening that up and allowing competition in a very mild way to produce better results, I can send my child to a private school at $6,700 a year, and she or he can get a better education than going to a current school in some areas of our state. School choice makes a difference. It'll drive skill levels up. It'll drive talent up. It helps teachers become more creative, smaller classroom sizes. It does all of the above. And it helps for a better student at the end. It may not make for a happier administration, but it makes for a better student.
Thank you.
You talked about our tax burden. You talked about reducing personal, corporate, other. How would you go about taking these pieces apart, and how would you go about addressing them, yet keeping Maryland healthy?
Yeah. Well, actually, I have to say this. Maryland's not healthy now. And I'm going to start my comments by saying that. Maryland's a very unhealthy state. $9 billion of our revenue on a $34 billion top line budget comes from the federal government in the form of stimulus and grants. We're already in a hole. We got to pull ourselves out. By reducing corporate tax, personal income tax, and sales tax down to 5%, it will increase, as Delegate Ron George stated, it will increase the tax base and bring a flood of business back to Maryland. My commitment to my Maryland businesses and entrepreneurs, and the ones they're contacting on our behalf of a Lollar administration for those businesses outside of our state that want to come here, like Volkswagen and SAIC and Black & Decker. My commitment to organizations and manufacturing jobs outside of our state that want to come to our state is we're going to provide for you a better economic climate for you to do business in. And by doing that, your commitment to us is you're going to come back. You're going to bring the revenue back to our state, because the more money you have, people tend to spend more money and invest more money. And most folks know in this room that are business CEOs and developers and manufacturing corporate partnerships with me, you know that residential properties don't necessarily pay taxes. The lion's share of taxes in our state come as a result of corporate tax. So if we bring in more corporations into our state, it's not rocket science, we'll increase our tax base. And that will help us become more and more and more healthy down the road. We just have to find a way to recoup and bring back. I cannot underscore enough. When you lose 33% of your manufacturing jobs over 7 to 9 years, not just the manufacturing tax goes with it, but so do the jobs. And I've often said this, and I'll continue to say this, no matter where I speak, the best entitlement program in the world is a job. And if the jobs leave, where else can you turn?
Maryland is also known for not being the most friendly towards manufacturing. What else would you do to change it in addition to taxes?
Well, I think the sole and number one thing I said this earlier, is to ensure that we look into regulation. Not just the taxes side, but the regulation. I was talking to a company, an energy company on the way here this morning. Number one, far and away, the number one biggest issue that corporation had was regulation, the excessive regulation. Just spend time and come with me down the Eastern Shore and talk to watermen down there and farmers down there. Talk to a farmer named Hudson, Alan Hudson, that had his own income, his own taxes, not income, but had the use of his taxes sue him because of deposits they thought they found on his farm through the University of Maryland and Law Center. And he had to use his own personal money to defend himself against that lawsuit. The regulation is killing industry, not just the farming industry, not just the waterman industry, not just the automobile industry, the manufacturing industry, and all the way down. The single most important thing our administration will contribute off the bat is we will create these industry-focused advisory boards. It's written up there, number 3 or 4. She did a good job catching up. We'll take this board, and we'll, in conjunction with the Department of DBED, we're going to work through every regulation, because what we don't need are more laws. What we need to do is something with the laws that are there that are making it difficult and abusive for business to exist. Keep in mind, in 2008, we had a 3.6 unemployment rate in 2008. We're now 7.1, 7.2, regardless of folks telling you that we've recouped 99% of our jobs. Boy, that was a funny one. We have a long way to go to get back to where we need to be, but it doesn't start by passing more legislation. It starts with doing something with the regulation excessive and the tax burden that's already there. I think that's what you expect of your next governor.
We have 1 minute left. I did want to ask a question about unemployment, the hearings and the process. Do you feel that they're fair for manufacturers, and what steps would you take to reform them?
Well, that's a great question. Number one, we need to do something about the unemployment tax. It's the 49th highest in the country, which means there's only one state that's worse than us. I think that at the end of the day, and I want to go back to what I said earlier, not to talk around it, but if we don't do something about the regulation and the taxes there, it's going to be, I don't think the system currently is fair for manufacturers. I think that's part of the reasons why they're leaving. But if we don't do something about the regulation code, and if we don't do something about the excessive taxes, we are going to continue to lose good businesses. People are going to continue to walk away. I could share with you, and I'll close with this with 30 seconds left, I could share with you story after story after story of manufacturing jobs leaving the state currently. I could share with you a story about one, which I'll remain nameless, business owner that looked at me and said, I went to the governor about the current state of affairs, and you know what he told me? He said, your governor looked at me and said, well, where else are you going to go? That type of tyrannical attitude that exists in Annapolis has got to change. And I and our administration will absolutely change it. I believe that government's job is certainly not to be a nanny. It's certainly not to be a priest. I believe the government's job and your governor's job is to ensure that every penny that comes into Annapolis is spent wisely, and what is not spent should be sent right back home to the taxpayer. I believe in a different way to conduct business in Annapolis. And I believe that if you take that opportunity, if you take that well-calculated risk on this gentleman and the Lollar team, you will not be let go. We want to see manufacturing jobs rise. We have to. Why hasn't it not? That's the question you have to ask yourself. And I'm not quite so sure we can solve the problem with the problem. And some of you will understand that better when you think it through on the way home. We have a huge opportunity here in this state to turn some things around. And I want to be part of that turnaround and that change. Thank you all so very much for having me here today.
Thank you. Thank you very much.